ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Tonight, reporting from San Francisco.
Good evening. We're going to be in San Francisco all week. It's a chance for us to hear what people in this part of the country think about the major issues. President Reagan has returned from his visit to Canada today, a country which sometimes advertises itself as friendly, foreign, far, and near. It has been a pretty important visit, not just because Canada is this country's closest ally and largest trading partner, but because Mr. Reagan and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney have each needed the visit to bolster their sagging political fortunes. They haven't agreed on very much, which may have a greater impact in Canada than it does here. ABC's Sheila Cast was with the President in Ottawa.
For President Reagan, Canada may have been the friendliest possible spot, and Prime Minister Mulroney the friendliest host for his first foreign trip since the Iran-Contra affair. But along with the smiles are real disputes, particularly over the acid rain damaging lakes and forests. All day at meetings with various Canadian officials, President Reagan fended off questions about Mulroney's goal of 50% reduction in U.S. sulfuric emissions.
I'm not against it. I like the total reduction of it. It's quite a technical problem.
The demonstration which the president passed on his way to Parliament underscored Canadian dissatisfaction with Mr. Reagan's go slow, more research approach to acid rain. Inside, before a joint session of Parliament, the president alluded to the cost of cleaning up and possibly changing to other sources of fuel.
Literally thousands of firms and millions of jobs will be affected by whatever steps we take on this problem. So there are no quick and easy answers.
But he said he would consider a bilateral accord on acid rain, a concession that fell far short of Mulroney's call for a treaty with congressional and parliamentary involvement. There are also trade disputes between the U.S. and Canada, but the president dwelt on efforts to create between them the biggest free trade zone in the world.
We shall commit ourselves and the resources of our administration to good faith negotiations that will make this visionary proposal a reality.
Leaving Parliament, an upbeat assessment of the summit.
Very fine 24 hours. Very successful.
Perhaps more successful for Mr. Reagan than for his host. Mulroney's political popularity has been slipping, and today his opposition said he had not managed to win concessions on acid rain from his American friend. Sheila Cast, ABC News, Ottawa.
And just how serious is this acid rain? In the first place, it is not just a Canadian problem. There are parts of this country which have been profoundly affected. But for Canada, it has a lot to do with the way Canadians see themselves. Here's ABC's Roger Karras.
Canada the Beautiful, an icy stream anticipating the spring thaw. But this lovely stream is lethal to fish and other wildlife. It is loaded with industrial filth that comes down from the sky in both rain and snow as acid. Sulfur dioxide plus water spells poison.
Snow is really the worst case. The pollution accumulates in these woods behind us over the winter. When spring comes, it all surges into the water of this small lake. Any fish that are trying to spawn, I wish them good luck.
Canadians care about their environment more than most people do, and they're perfectly willing to have us share this kind of splendor with them, but they're not willing to have us help them destroy it.
And we are helping them. Canadians claim that at least half of the industrial pollution that plagues Canada today comes from American smokestacks. Acid precipitation has put 50,000 lakes in jeopardy and is endangering Canada's #1 industry, forest products, by retarding forest growth. That could spell economic disaster.
Acid rain is the single worst environmental problem facing all of North America. It's an environmental time bomb, ticking away, waiting to explode.
The Canadians feel that Americans have concentrated far too much in research and have done little to set standards for industry. They contend we already know acid precipitation poisons water, kills fish, harms forests, and even eats buildings of stone, like the Parliament buildings in Ottawa. It is assumed it isn't good for human health.
Americans have made promises to Canada that they haven't kept. And I'm anxious for those promises to be kept. We're talking about our children's heritage.
We have a shared history and to some extent shared values. And all of those things are true, but they amount to naught if one country throws garbage in the front lawn of the other. and turns a blind eye to that fact.
If Americans don't open their eyes soon, environmentalists say scenes like this may not be there to see. Roger Karras, ABC News, Ottawa, Canada.
Later in this broadcast, the sorry state of American security in Moscow. What sort of shape is Sugar Ray Leonard really in? Can he possibly beat Marvin Hagler? And we'll meet a man here in San Francisco who does indeed remind us of Captain Nemo.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings in San Francisco. Brought to you by AT&T.
In Moscow today, Representatives Dan Mica of Florida and Olympia Snow of Maine spent the day touring the U.S. Embassy and interviewing the staff. And they said when they were finished, it would cost tens of millions of dollars to make the present embassy building secure. And there are already reports about how insecure the new embassy building will be. In Washington, everyone is up in arms about U.S. security in Moscow in general. And here's ABC's John McCarthy.
Senate Majority Leader Robert Byrd led the attack today, accusing the administration of gross negligence.
The Moscow embassy fiasco is a textbook case in incompetence. Who is minding the store, the intelligence store?
President Reagan, who was in Canada over the weekend, admitted he has not paid much attention for the last few days.
I haven't kept up since we've been on this trip with exactly what we're doing, but I know that we've set out to do whatever we feel is necessary.
In Moscow today, the U.S. took a small step toward putting the embassy back in business. Jack Matlock, the new U.S. ambassador, presented his credentials at the Kremlin and is now officially on the job. The Soviets, meanwhile, have added to administration embarrassment with a steady stream of light comments about the scandal.
Well, for us, it's a very funny example of espionage.
The State Department, which bears much responsibility for poor security, is not amused.
We don't think that there's anything funny about this situation. We take it in the most serious manner possible. I think that we would expect the Soviet Union to understand that.
The Soviets, of course, understand all too well that the Reagan administration now has another problem. As a result, barbed humor from the Kremlin is expected to continue just as long as it gets a rise from Washington. John McCarthy, ABC News, the State Department.
In Washington today, Congressman Jack Kemp became the third Republican to say formally he will run for his party's presidential nomination. The other two are Pete DuPont, former governor of Delaware, and the former Secretary of State, Alexander Haig. Some biographical information on Kemp from our fact file. He is 51. He is married and has 4 children. He was born in Southern California. His first career was in football. He played 13 years for the San Diego Chargers and the Buffalo Bills. He went into politics full-time when he was 35. He's been a congressman from upstate New York for 9 terms. ABC's Barry Serafin was there when Kemp announced today.
I announce my candidacy for the President of the United States of America.
With that, Jack Kemp officially stepped into the political big league. He first attracted attention in another league. As a pro football quarterback, Kemp set 3 passing records and was president of the Players Association. Even then, he dabbled off-season in Republican politics. Despite some cheerleading by supporters, Kemp has been on the sidelines of presidential politics until now. His biggest splash as a congressman came as co-author of the Kemp-Roth tax cut bill. Some say that has cast him as a Johnny One-Note.
The one issue that he's been identified with, its day is kind of past.
Kemp has portrayed himself as the heir to the Reagan Revolution. In fact, in some respects, he's taken positions more conservative than those of the president. He has called for the resignation of Secretary of State Schultz. He supports the Nicaraguan Contras to the point of advocating their recognition as a government in exile. Reporters today wanted to know if his support would extend to sending U.S. troops.
The legitimacy of the fight for freedom requires U.S. moral and material support, not U.S. blood or troops.
Kemp is undaunted by polls showing him trailing George Bush and Bob Dole.
I'm in this race to stay. I'm in this race to the end.
Kemp, though, will be bucking history. It's been more than a century since anyone has made the jump from the House to the White House. Barry Serafin, ABC News, Washington.